Good morning. Ford has worked primarily on protecting the car from rust. The Mondeo is not yet a masterpiece in this category and still has isolated cases of rusty efflorescence, mainly on the front fenders, but most examples have bodies in impeccable condition. The issue of windows is worse. The front windows often delaminate. Occasionally, water can get into the car's interior near the front window. This should be monitored. In addition, the rear window heating sometimes does not work at all. The faulty windows were replaced under warranty, which is unlikely to be covered now. There are also known cases of the quick clear heated front window not working properly, if the car is equipped with it. However, it may turn out that it is enough to replace one of the two fuses that control it, and everything returns to normal. An interesting fact is that Ford changed the supplier of the front and rear windows. In the Mondeo Mk4, all the windows were made by Saint-Gobain Securit, while in the Mk4, only the side windows come from this manufacturer. The front and rear are Pilkington products. Maybe it would have been better to stick with Securit. Problems with xenon headlights are encountered quite regularly, from the not very long life of the lenses to problems with their leveling. The causes are various, from a simple motor extension to a sensor failure. Cars equipped with xenon most often scare with errors when driving on uneven roads. Cases of the headlight getting dirty from the inside are frequent. There are also repeated opinions that even fully functional Mondeo Mk4 xenon headlights are not very effective. The air conditioning and heating system is also a hotspot. It is sometimes considered inefficient, and the air conditioning is sensitive to the level of refrigerant in the system. In addition, there are problematic air conditioning compressor clutches. However, they usually give you early warning that something is wrong by loudly rattling. If there are failures in electrics and electronics, surprisingly often the fault lies with damaged wiring harnesses, and less often with loosely seated plugs. Unfortunately, problems with the quality of the electrical installation are reported in relation to many elements of the car's equipment, from parking sensors and headlights through airbags to ABS and ESP systems. The last issue is the upholstery and interior finish. The dashboard can creak, and the seat upholstery in the basic Ambiente or Trend versions is not very durable. After the facelift, some materials and the fit of individual elements have been noticeably improved. Following the example of its predecessor, the Ford Mondeo Mk4 has classic McPherson struts at the front and a multi-link system at the rear. Optionally, this could be enhanced with adaptive IVDC shock absorbers, relatively durable. The suspension system has been praised for its high comfort, good handling, and low maintenance costs, but it also has a few problems. The first one is an old friend: rust. While the bodywork has a problem with rust relatively rarely, it is still quite common in the chassis, although this mainly concerns threaded connections, the exhaust system or the wishbones, and the subframe. Corroded screws used to adjust the geometry of the rear suspension are often mentioned. However, it should be noted that sometimes the situation is not as bad as it seems. There are cases when old rusty screws can be unscrewed without much problem and then reused. However, this is a lottery. It is better to assume that the screws will actually be suitable for the trash during the rear suspension service. It should be noted here that suspension geometry is a topic that every owner, current or future, should be very interested in. Possible problems in this area include steering wheel tilt when driving straight, car pulling to one side, steering wheel vibration, or tire serration. The steering gear also has a limited durability, which, after a longer mileage, may have play and make knocking noises. There are cases of the steering wheel shaking during braking. One might suspect that the cause of the brake discs curving would be the same as in the recently described Opel Insignia, i.e. the car's excessive weight, but this would be a false lead, because despite its large external dimensions, the Mondeo Mk4 weighs only slightly more than its predecessor and significantly less than the Opel. However, the problem exists and is repeated in the case of many manufacturers of brake discs, causing insomnia for some owners. It has not been confirmed so far what causes the problems. In some cases, more thorough cleaning of the hubs helps, but this is not the rule. The reliability of the rear axle brakes has been significantly improved. They no longer cause as many problems as in the previous generation Mondeo, including the auxiliary brake. HIDs. In the chassis, it is also worth taking a look at the rear wheel bearings, which occasionally give a hard time. The fact that a damaged tire can cause a similar sound experience may be of little consolation, so if in doubt, it is worth starting by swapping the wheels, for example. Although many people are looking for Mondeo with diesel engines, Ford also offered a range of petrol units in this model, starting with the weakest, naturally aspirated 1.6 through also naturally aspirated 2.0 and 2.3, up to turbocharged 1.6, 2.0 and 2.5. In principle, none of these engines is worse than the units of the competition, although they are based on different solutions. 1.6 is the work of Yamaha, 2.0 and 2.3 Mazda, and 2.5 Volvo. Of course, in each of these options we are dealing with modifications introduced by Ford, especially in the 1.6T and 2.0T models. The naturally aspirated 1.6 engines are, contrary to appearances, relatively popular, despite their somewhat underpowered nature for such a car. Those who have opted for these versions are satisfied. In fact, it is difficult to speak of repeatable faults here. Occasional problems may be caused by the variable valve timing system, called TIVCT by Ford. The 2.3 engines, combined only with an automatic transmission and found only in pre-facelift cars, are a complete margin of the market, and it is difficult to say anything about them. However, they are based on the same solutions as the 2.0 units. These are relatively popular and sought after on the secondary market. An issue that is sometimes raised by users is the famous flaps in the intake manifold. In cases of extreme wear, they can theoretically come loose and fall into the cylinder, causing engine demolition. However, the installation is clearly improved compared to the Mondeo Mk4 because this problem is not mentioned very often. It should be noted that occasionally 2.0 engines have problems with increased oil consumption. Piston rings are often indicated as the culprit. In extreme cases, the engine may need to be repaired or replaced with another one. Nevertheless, it is easier to find models that do not lose oil at all between changes. 2.0 145 HP engines also sometimes run unevenly and have fluctuating revs. The problem is often a dirty throttle valve. All this sounds serious, but these are rare faults. Overall, Duratec HE engines have a reputation for being durable and reliable. They can be recommended. The 2.5T engine, found only before the facelift and only with a manual gearbox, is commonly known as a unit with an armored block and a crank piston system. It has one recurring problem. It often does not reach the factory power, which is why chip tuning of these engines is popular. In many cases, owners of such Mondeos are only interested in regaining lost horsepower and possibly improving the course of the power and torque curve. The Duratec i5 engine is sensitive to timely replacement of the timing belt. It is better not to delay it. The 1.6T and 2.0T engines, known as EcoBoost, appeared in the Ford Mondeo Mk4 after the facelift and are a fairly common option, with the possible exception of the top 2.0 with 240 HP. From the very beginning, they were quite refined and did not cause any major problems, although occasionally there are cases of going into emergency mode and not reaching full power, e.g. as a result of turbocharger damage, cases cracking, among other things. Attention should be paid to the cooling system. Regardless of the engine, it can cause problems. Coolant leaks can occur. A common fault in petrol engines is the failure of fuel system components. Fuel pumps and pressure regulators break down, and attention should also be paid to the fuel lines. Opinions are divided when it comes to installing a gas system. Most Ford engines don't tolerate them very well. The best for such an application is the 2.5T unit from Volvo due to its more durable head. The Ford Mondeo Mk4 was offered with a total of 4 diesel engines in various power versions. The most common are the 1.8 and, above all, the 2.0 TDCi. The first is a heavily modified, old, cast-iron engine designed by Ford, which is characterized by average performance and, in addition, has a noticeable turbo lag. It also has a mediocre work culture and an endurable, but cheap, dual-mass flywheel. There are also comments about the durability of the injection system. However, the 1.8 TDCi has something up its sleeve. It has never had a particulate filter installed. In addition, it is a unit with an exceptionally durable crank piston system. You have to be careful when replacing the timing. There are systems with 2 belts, or with a short chain and a belt connecting the injection pump to the camshaft. Ford often modernized these elements, so the correct selection of parts can be a challenge. The 2.0 TDCi unit could have from 115 to 163 HP. This is an engine designed jointly by Ford and the PSA Group. After years, the 2.0 TDCi became known as one of the best diesel engines on the market. It is durable and well known by mechanics. Among its typical problems, we can mention primarily the failure of the particulate filter, due to which the engines sometimes enter emergency mode. It is worth noting here that problems with the DPF can also affect newer versions of the engine, DW10C, and this despite the fact that they have filters with an additional injector. Previously, Ford used ordinary dry filters. There are also repeated reports of difficult starting or incorrect operation in frost or unstable turbochargers. Some have problems with electrically controlled radiator shutters. Similar problems can be encountered by owners of the larger 2.2 TDCi engine, which is, however, much less common and more expensive to repair. The last option is the 1.6 TDCi engine, which replaced the old 1.8 TDCi unit. The 1.6, like the 2.0 TDCi designed together with the PSA group, has a much better work culture than the 1.8, but it clearly lacks power. Its typical fault is the seizing of the turbocharger, which is usually due to the pipe supplying oil to it. It sometimes gets clogged. It is recommended to replace it periodically, preventatively, or at least check it. In addition, the DPF filter or dual-mass flywheel sometimes do not require it either. The Mondeo Mk4 used 4 types of gearboxes, 2 manuals, 5 and 6-speed, a 6-speed automatic called DuraShift, and also a 6-speed PowerShift dual-clutch gearbox. Manual gearboxes do not cause any problems. The Aisin hydrokinetic gearbox, DuraShift, was combined with the 2.3 petrol engine and the 2.0 and 2.2 TDCi diesels. The gearbox has its fans thanks to its smooth operation, but it sometimes has problems with shifting into the next gear, or with reducing them. The PowerShift gearbox is manufactured by German Getrag and can be found in the petrol Mondeo 2.0 EcoBoost and some post-facelift diesel 2.0 TDCi. It had some problems in its infancy, such as mechatronics failures. Later, the durability of the gearbox was improved, and more services appeared that were able to service and repair these gearboxes at normal prices. PowerShift is more demanding than DuraShift in terms of oil changes. In addition, the drivetrain rarely causes problems. True, dual-mass flywheels in diesels are not very durable, especially in the 1.8 TDCi, but in petrol models, there is no reason to have any reservations about them. No, the Mondeo doesn't have a reputation for being particularly well made, but serious failures are rare. More often you're dealing with annoying little things, although sometimes difficult to locate, like faulty wiring or plugs. There's not a single engine in the range that could be clearly advised against. The car also seems to be slightly more resistant to neglected maintenance than the Opel Insignia, but this largely depends on the specific version. The 2.0 TDCi with Aisin gearbox or the 2.0 EcoBoost with PowerShift will not forgive us as much as the naturally aspirated 1.6 and 2.0 versions with manual gearboxes. LPG enthusiasts should probably also look for other options or choose the 5-cylinder Mondeo 2.5T from before the facelift. Problems with suspension geometry are not necessarily the most common, but they are among the most troublesome. If they are severe, the fight against them can be long. If you are interested in buying, arm yourself with patience. Well-maintained petrols are selling almost immediately, and among the diesels there are many cars from fleets. And if you know of any common errors, your comments are welcome.